Elio here. We're going to do some QA videos. It took a hot second between Endwalker, IRL responsibilities, and video making to get to it, so better late than never. But I hope to continue this more regularly, assuming we actually have questions from all you guys. Before we continue, here's the obligatory subscribe, like, and comment request. Otherwise, I have to sacrifice my firstborn child to our YouTube overlords. With that out of the way, let's go. This also may be a little bit more rambly and off the cuff than some of my more usual content, more because it takes time to process and actually fine-tune everything if I don't make it a little bit more, stream of consciousness. However, I will take consideration with every question. Kate Halcyon says, "Hello there. Would you be so kind as to break down the Tycoon and how the journey came to be, and how all the pieces referenced there came together?" So first off, Shadowbringer spoilers, but also spoilers for the Alexander raid and the Omega raid from Heavensward and Stormblood respectively. So the first thing to understand about the Tycoon, which is at the bottom of the Crystal Tower, at least the one that existed on the first. The thing to understand about it is that it's built off of the fundamental ideas and technology at hand from Alexander and Omega. The important thing is that Alexander basically not taught, but kind of conveyed the idea that time travel was possible and the sort of mechanism by which it could function. And Omega, basically the same, but more for spatial distortions and moving through space. So if you put that together, what happened was in the 8th Umbral Calamity timeline, the Cid of that timeline took the stories of the Warrior of Light and the stories of the things we went through and their knowledge that they learned from those two events and used them to basically come up with the concept of how they would move the Crystal Tower back through time. That then folds into the Crystal Exarch, into Grahatia, and all of that. But the fundamental underlying thing is that the Tycoon is basically a confluence of their journey involving Omega and the journey involving Alexander, which is why when you go and fight it, it shows portals in moments of time connected to those events, and why its mechanics are tied to both of those bosses. That's the underlying function by which it works. The important thing is that when they moved the Crystal Tower through time using that technology, it created a branch timeline, but it did not erase their timeline. It did not fix their timeline. It did not erase their timeline. If you read one of the short stories, I am forgetting what the name of it is, it makes very clear that just because they went back in time did not change their causality. The important thing to understand within the confines of Final Fantasy XIV is that there are a couple examples of time travel, and there are two fundamental principles behind them. One is either fixed timeline, where everything is a circle and things played out already the way they played out. So by traveling back in time, you are changing nothing because you already intended to go back in time. There is one Alexander is more of a specific example of that, and there's another example I cannot reference. Then there's the branching theory timeline, which is what happens when Grahatia, the Crystal Exarch, travels back in time in the Crystal Tower and travels to the first and brings us to the first, which allows for everything to be, changed, but not erase their timeline, which is also what makes the things that the people in the 8th Umbral Calamity timeline do all the more powerful. They knew that they were putting in all this effort to save others, but it was never going to save them. It was not going to undo the 8th Umbral Calamity. It was not going to bring them any better lives, but it was going to make a better world for everyone else. And to me, that's beautiful. OGR asks, in lore perspective, what happened to the Warriors of Light of 1.0? If you're a legacy player, it's you, but if not. So this is kind of a matter of how you choose to receive it. My personal way of reading it is that, and this is that even if you were not a legacy player, you can realize that everything still kind of fits. And even though, yes, there's some alternate dialogue that makes it very explicit you are a 1.0 player if you're a legacy player, honestly, you could still argue that as a 2.0 player, you still could have been the warrior from 1.0, but you could also argue that you're a fresh new face. You can kind of go either way. It allows you to play it how you kind of wish it to be. The thing is, if you look at it from a canonical standpoint, and there are canonical versions of all the events that happen, basically the Warrior of Light is the Warrior of Light from 1.0. If you are a legacy player, you have multiple options from which you can kind of choose to imply your own version of the journey. what happened to the Warriors of Light that weren't the I forget the word that the name that they use, but the basically Ardbert like. We don't necessarily know. They may have been lost in time. They may have been, destroyed, killed. Who we can't say for sure. But that's also why the Warriors of Darkness are so specifically a mirror to those characters. If you look at them, they are one to one, a direct reference to the prior, the 1.0 versions of those characters in cutscenes, like answers in the answer cinematic. Serene asks, I'd really be interested in learn about the process of how you guys make videos. Just an overview. Might be interesting for viewers too to have an idea of how much work goes into it. So, there are three of us currently who basically make up the totality of Eorzean Archives, and they are Isidorel, Elio Forcheron, me, and Naniri. Naniri is basically responsible for our website and all of the articles. Isidorel is our tech guy and all around super support, and I'm very thankful for both of them. They make my life so much easier and just make the entire process more exciting. I am responsible for basically writing all of the videos, although I do often, if not all the time, give the scripts for them to Naniri or Isidorel, usually both, and they kind of either they'll give me a no if, for instance, I may have gotten something slightly wrong, or they feel slightly different, or maybe a wording feels kind of clunky and I've missed it. So the process for that is basically they're my reviewers, editors, however you want to frame it. But I do all the writing for those. I do all the footage gathering, though Isidorel has started to help with that. And footage gathering takes the most amount of time by far. It just takes so much time to get all the shots. I do all the video editing, and basically in general, I'm responsible for the vast majority of YouTube. That is kind of how things break down. We also are all on our Discord, which you should definitely come check out. I also run the Patreon, which you should definitely subscribe to. The process basically goes, I have a huge, massive list of every topic I want to cover. And depending on the situation, I'll either pick based on what I'm feeling like, what has been requested, or what I have time for. I will then take that and I will write scripts. And so some days I will spend all my energy on trying to write 4 scripts or write multiple scripts. And how long they are completely depends based on the topic. If it's something like a bestiary entry, that's only going to be like a page long. It's relatively quick, but it still takes time to go research it. If it's something like a class quest, Jesus, that can be anywhere from like 4 to 8 pages long, and the amount of time it takes to research it is inordinate. The tends to be what I do is I will pick the topic, go research a bunch. As I research, and research can be me playing the game. It can be me reading Encyclopedia Eorzea. It can be basically everything I can possibly get any information for the topic. And then I will take notes and notes and notes and notes while I'm doing that. And then once I've done that, I'll often set it to a side for a day. And I will then come back and I will look at the script and I will be like, okay, I see kind of the basic structure of what I'm going to do. And so I'll create a structure and I'll create a very rough draft. And then I will set that aside and go work on something else. I'll go write another video. I'll go edit a video. Just depends. And what will happen then is I'll come back to that after a day or two. And I will be like, ooh, no. That's I need to reword, I need to move, I need to super move it around and refine it basically until it actually works. And on top of that, what will happen is at that point, I will also then have either maybe happenstancely found another piece of information. It can be all sorts of things can happen in the meantime that might be a little gem that I can add into the script. So once the script is done, then I have to go record, which I have a recording booth that I built that is right next to me. Maybe I'll show that off sometime. A soundproof booth. And that can take all of the research. Research can take hours, and how many hours depends. Writing is kind of the same thing. It can be anywhere from 2 hours of research and 2 hours of writing to much more. Recording is usually about 15 minutes to an hour for each video, and then I have to edit the audio, which I do using Audacity, and that just varies depending on the video and how many times I flub the lines. After that, I then have my audio, and I toss that into a program called DaVinci Resolve, which is the video editing program I use. And then I have to go gather the footage, which it just takes a lot of time. And what will happen is I will basically take the reading that I've done, the audio that I've done, and I will throw on basically little video notes that show a thing that'll say, like, let's say there's a I know there's a 5-second section that needs a video of Ultima doing something. I'll just type in Ultima moves and just have that there, and I'll basically have what amounts to the framework of the entire video with all those little notes. Then I will go and collect as many notes as possible that make sense. And because of that, I have a very, very good sense of what footage exists in the game for cutscenes, so that I can avoid having to manually make as many pieces of footage as possible. Not that it doesn't still take time, even if you're going to go search for cutscenes and record them, but it's a much easier, and is visually tends to be more pretty to have an actually created cutscene rather than having to make something from scratch. Typically, that will take a long period of time. It can be many hours, and it, again, depends on the video. And what will happen then is I take... there'll still tend to be holes at that point, either because timing didn't line up, or there's just no good footage for what I'm looking for. It can be all sorts of reasons. And then at that point, I'll have to either construct pieces of footage, or via many methods I won't go into. You could ask me in messages in our Discord if you really want to know. But the thing on top of that is that then I just kind of basically have to find a way to make it work, whether that be filler video or whatever. And I take a lot of pride in trying to make it as visually interesting and as possible, and for what is going on screen to match what I am saying. And I could probably turn out a lot more videos if I was less discerning, but I'd be a lot less proud of them, and I'd be a lot less happy with them. So it tends to take a lot of period of time. After that, I then throw up the video. I have to render them out, which takes a little bit, and then I throw them on YouTube. That takes about an hour or 2 hours to upload. And while that's uploading, I will create the thumbnail, which I do using Photoshop. I will basically find a good photo of what I want to, of the subject matter, and then I will throw that into Photoshop, use layers. I will tend to try and create a way of making the subject. I'll use a removal tool or basically outline them and then remove them and create a drop shadow under them so that there's a foreground element, which gives the image some depth. I'll adjust the colors and yada, yada, yada. And then I will use Illustrator with a special text font I had made to create the lettering that exists on top of the thumbnails. And that's basically what goes into the videos. It can be a long process. It's usually a hard process, but it's very rewarding, and I have a lot of fun. And thanks to the team that works with me, even if I'm doing a lot of the work alone, they're incredibly helpful for morale, or for checking things, or just for, like, if you're alone in making this, there's always a fear you're going to get something wrong. So if you can have people who are by your side you can trust, and also trust that you're competent but are just giving you a quick, sanity check, it makes things a lot easier. So this next one has some Endwalker spoilers, so just be very careful of that. And then on top of that, it kind of comes in 2 parts and is a long one, so it may take a second both to answer and to fully read. OGR asks, question, Emmett Silk that they, I'm assuming being the Assians and specifically the Convocation, were tempered by Zodiark, but the blessing of Hydaelyn saves people from tempering. Why couldn't they do something like the Traveler's War that Vana did? And more, we were told that all primals were tempering only because of flaw and summoning added by the Assians. But originally creation magics were not supposed to temper others. So why did Zodiark temper Assians? So the important thing is that what I'm about to say is a little bit of speculation, because one thing, it depends on the function by which creatures existed within the time of the Unsundered World, which we have a much better sense for now, but we don't have a perfect sense. The first thing that's worthy of noting is that really that when Zodiark first came to be, he tempered everyone immediately. People were just like, oh fuck, the world is on fire, the apocalypse is happening, please, oh god, anyone save us. So they weren't thinking, yes, we need to protect ourselves, or yes, this thing we're about to summon is going to temper us. They were just like, fuck it, we need help, please. So that's really important in terms of understanding the mindset. It's not that just being an Assian prevents you from being tempered. On top of that, a normal primal may not have been able to temper an Assian, but the thing about Zodiarch is that he is an elder primal, which elder is sometimes referred to more in terms of being its age, so it can be ancient, but usually what it really means is how powerful it is. Zodiarch is literally the most powerful primal. In terms of like etheric density and the amount of aether it had access to, it is inordinately powerful. A single ancient is incredibly powerful. You combine that with the fact that 50% of all ancients sacrifice themselves to power the aether of Zodiarch, and think about how powerful Zodiarch is when we contend with him and he's not even at full strength. Zodiarch's power is such that his effect on Assians, on ancients, is going to be much different than a regular primal. Okay, with that out of the way, this is also partly why I go into the fact that it's really important that we don't fully understand the confines of the Unsundered world. And here's the thing. We don't know that necessarily sundering, or not sundering, but tempering is not a thing that did not exist within the Unsundered world. And I don't think the point that they're making is that primals could not temper. The point they're making is that the desire, the rampant desire for all the primals to be like, temper, 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 we want to temper everyone, is something that was not supposed to be. It was not supposed to be that way. Whereas, and you can see that in the likes of Ramuh, right? Ramuh does not necessarily want to temper, and he's supposed to be older and more knowledgeable than the other primals, and so he's slightly different, but just his sheer existence tempers the sylph around him. Right? That's how you get, even though he does not want to temper them, the crazed sylph, I forget their specific designation, the purple ones were tempered not by his choice, but just by being around him. That could very well be what's happening with Zodiarch. Zodiarch did not come into existence, and depending on when Elidibus became his heart, if we assume right away, the assumption is not that Elidibus went, I want to temper people. It's much more likely that Zodiarch, just as a byproduct of being insanely powerful and having that capacity, affected those around him. And I think that's probably a pretty fair reading based on what we know. So it's not so much that Zodiarch came into being was like, aha, temper. It just came into being huge blast of aether that drastically affected the souls of those and the memories of the memories in a looser sense of the specifically the convocation. We can definitely assume the convocation. We don't know if it necessarily affected all the other people, ancients of the time. I don't think so. It very well could have, but the fact that Vana and whoever she was working with were not affected implies to me that there was a proximity around Zodiarch that would have affected everybody else. So it does actually really line up with what we understand. It's only that it seems a little bit confusing because it seems like what they're implying is that tempering at all was a flaw, but it's more that tempering, the rampant desire to temper for a summoned primal is a flaw that is a part of their creation magics that the Assians teach to all the sundered beings. Okay, so that's it for this week, this month. I think probably monthly for now, but would really love if any of you have any other lore questions, and it's actually really fun to answer them, and lovely to see your guys' engagement. You can also message us on our Discord, and if you subscribe to our Patreon, you will for sure get your message on here. Although, to be honest, you probably will anyway. So if you're subscribing to Patreon, it's mostly just to support us, but we appreciate it all the same. With that, I think that just about does it. So have a lovely month, week, evening, Endwalker. Have a lovely Endwalker, everyone. Cheers. This content was brought to you by the Eorzean Archives. If you enjoyed this video, help us please the 12 by leaving a like and subscribing for new content every Thursday. And comment down below with any topic you'd like to see our archons cover in the future. For even more content, discussion, and exclusives, please check out our Discord and consider supporting us on Patreon.